How do you revolutionize an entire industry while building a championship organization? In 1979, Bill Walsh took over the San Francisco 49ers, a team that had won just 2 games the previous season and was considered the worst franchise in all of professional football. 10 years later, he had not only won 3 Super Bowl championships, but he had fundamentally changed the way the game was played. The West Coast offense that Walsh created became the blueprint that every modern NFL team still uses today. What Walsh understood wasn't just about football, it was about systematic innovation. While others relied on tradition and gut instinct, Walsh engineered a complete transformation using principles that every business leader can apply. Welcome to the highest level. I'm Coach Evan, and I study what separates legendary leaders from everyone else. Today, we're breaking down Bill Walsh's leadership model, the systematic innovation and meticulous preparation that turned chaos into championships and changed an industry forever. By the end of this case study, you'll have 5 proven leadership principles that create sustainable competitive advantage through innovation, whether you're leading a Fortune 500 company or building a startup from the ground up. Let's dive in. First, let's understand the magnitude of what Walsh achieved. When he became head coach of the 49ers in 1979, he inherited what many considered the worst organization in professional sports. 2 wins in 16 games, no systems, no identity, no hope. But here's what makes this relevant for business leaders. Walsh didn't just fix the football problems, he systematically rebuilt the entire organization using what he called his standard of performance, a blueprint for creating excellence that had nothing to do with winning and had everything to do with how things were done. Walsh said, running a football franchise is not unlike running any other business. You start first with a structural format and basic philosophy, and then find people who can implement it. This isn't just about sports. This is about the challenge every leader faces when they inherit dysfunction or need to innovate in a competitive market. How do you create systematic change that produces sustainable results? How do you innovate under pressure without losing what makes you successful? Walsh mastered this through what we can break down into 5 core principles. Each one transformed how the 49ers operated and directly applies to your leadership challenges in today's rapidly changing business environment. The Bill Walsh Leadership Model. Principle 1: systematic innovation over random creativity. Most organizations approach innovation backwards. They wait for creative inspiration or copy what competitors are doing. Walsh understood that true innovation comes from systematic thinking applied to specific problems. Here's how he revolutionized football. When Walsh analyzed the NFL in 1979, he saw that what most teams relied on was running the ball and throwing deep passes. But Walsh had a different insight. What if you could control the game through short, precise passes that move the chains consistently? This became the West Coast offense. But here's the key: it wasn't just a creative burst, it was a systematic innovation. Walsh broke down every passing route by timing, precision, and defensive vulnerability. He created what he called progression reads, which means that if a receiver is covered up, you go to the next receiver and then the next one, all within a 3-second framework. This was revolutionary at the time, but the true genius was in the system. Walsh said each drill must have a direct relationship to the specific action that player would experience in the game. Every practice drill, every route, every timing pattern was engineered to solve a specific competitive problem. The result? The 49ers didn't just win championships, they changed how the game is played. Today, every NFL team runs some version of Walsh's system because it proved that systematic innovation creates sustainable competitive advantages. Now, why does this matter for your leadership? Most business innovation fails because it's random rather than systematic. Leaders get excited about new ideas without connecting them to specific competitive problems or building the systems to execute them. The tactical takeaway: identify your industry's fundamental assumptions, then systematically engineer better solutions. Don't innovate for innovation's sake. Innovate to solve specific competitive problems that others haven't addressed. This is exactly what I see in breakthrough companies. Leaders who approach innovation like Walsh approached football. They study the competitive landscape, identify the inefficiencies, then systematically build better solutions rather than hoping for creative lightning strikes. Walsh proved that systematic innovation beats random creativity every time. The key takeaway here: systematic innovation beats random creativity every time. Principle 2: standards driven culture over motivational speeches. Walsh's most revolutionary insight wasn't about football strategy, it was about organizational culture. While other coaches relied on emotional speeches and intimidation, Walsh created what he called his standard of performance: 17 written principles that defined how the 49ers would operate. Here's what made this different: Walsh didn't focus on winning, he focused on behavior. His standards covered everything from how players answered phones to how they sat in meetings. He said, "This is who we are, this is who we're going to be. This is the roadmap to being excellent." Here are some examples of his standard of performance: be deeply committed to learning and teaching, demonstrate respect for each person in the organization, show self control, especially under pressure, honor the direct connection between details and improvement. But here's the key: these weren't suggestions, they were non negotiable standards applied equally to everyone, from superstars to equipment managers. Walsh believed that culture wasn't about motivation, it was about documentation. He said, "You have to develop an ethic so that on every down you play as well as you can play." The issue was playing as well as you could play. The result? The 49ers developed what Walsh called unconscious competence. Players performed at the highest level automatically because the standards had become part of their identity. Now, why does this matter for your leadership? Most organizational cultures are based on hope rather than standards. Leaders assume that hiring good people and giving them motivational speeches will create the behavior that they want. The tactical takeaway: document your organizational standards in writing. Make them specific, measurable, and universally applied. Culture isn't about what you say in meetings, it's about what you write down and consistently enforce. This is what separates championship organizations from everyone else. They don't rely on individual motivation to drive performance. They create systems where excellence becomes automatic because the standards are clear and non negotiable. Walsh understood that sustainable excellence comes from standards driven culture, not personality driven motivation. The key takeaway here: culture is what you write down and consistently enforce. Principle 3: teaching based leadership over command and control. Walsh approached leadership fundamentally differently than his peers. While other coaches barked orders and expected compliance, Walsh treated leadership as teaching. His philosophy was simple: teaching skills is the foundation of all coaching. Here's how this worked in practice. Walsh required every coach to break down their position responsibilities into specific skills, then design drills that develop those skills systematically. He said each drill must have a direct relationship to a specific action the player would experience in the game. But the genius was in his teaching methodology. Walsh treated everyone with what he called tremendous dignity. Players later said that they were glad to be there because he treated them with such respect while demanding excellence at the same time. His coaching process was systematic. First, the appropriate behavior is described in very specific terms. Second, the skill is performed under direct observation. Third, the behavior is critiqued with specific constructive feedback. And fourth, appropriate execution is reinforced positively. Walsh said, "Performance enhancement was the theme of everything that we did. The point was to help a player be better and to reinforce him in the process. The result? Walsh created what he called muscle memory that freed players from thinking. Under pressure, players executed automatically because the teaching had become so thorough. But here's what made Walsh different. He applied this to everyone. He said, I instructed everyone scouting that I wanted to know what the redeeming quality is of this person. What can they do to help us win? Don't just tell me what they can't do, tell me what he can do. Now, why does this matter for your leadership? Most leaders default to command and control when pressure increases. They tell people what to do rather than teaching them why and how to think through the problems. The tactical takeaway: shift from giving orders to developing capabilities. Break complex responsibilities into teachable skills. Then create systematic development processes that build competence rather than dependence. This is exactly what I see in high performing organizations. Leaders who understand that teaching creates sustainable competitive advantage. When you develop people's thinking rather than just directing their actions, they perform better under pressure because they understand the principles, not just the procedure. Walsh proved that teaching based leadership creates better results than command and control. The key takeaway here: teaching creates competitive advantage, commands create dependence. Principle 4: collaborative excellence over individual genius. Walsh's most counterintuitive leadership principle was this: the best decisions come from collaborative input, not individual genius. While other coaches operated as dictators, Walsh created what he called open forums, where everyone contributed to the decision making of the organization. Here's the story that shows this in action. Walsh regularly sought input from players, assistant coaches, and even equipment staff when making critical decisions. He said winning teams are more like open forums in which everyone participates in the decision making process, coaches and players alike, until the decision is made. But this wasn't democratic leadership, it was systematic intelligence gathering. Walsh understood that the people closest to the execution often had the best insights about what would actually work. His approach was structured. Before games, he'd ask players what they were seeing from opponents. During games, he'd get real time feedback about what was working. After games, he'd conduct systematic reviews with everyone involved. Walsh said, the minute there is a difficulty, you have to be ready to attack the problem and find a way to communicate about it without it being difficult. It's part of building leadership throughout the team. The result? The 49ers became known for making brilliant adjustments because Walsh had created systems to capture collective intelligence rather than relying on his individual insights. But here's the key insight: Walsh still had to make the final decisions. He said others must know who is in command, that a head coach must believe dogmatically. Then, once the decision is made, the team must be motivated to go ahead and execute it. This created what he called collaborative accountability. Everyone contributed to decisions, so everyone was invested in executing them successfully. Now, why does this matter for your leadership? Most leaders either micromanage everything or delegate without context. Neither approach captures the collective intelligence of an organization. The tactical takeaway: create systematic processes for gathering input before making critical decisions. Then communicate the decision making rationale clearly. People execute better when they understand not just what to do, but why it was decided. This is what separates exceptional leaders from good ones. They understand that their job isn't to be the smartest person in the room, it's to create systems that capture the collective intelligence of the organization and channel it toward better decisions. Walsh proved that collaborative excellence beats individual genius every time. The key takeaway here: collaborative input creates better decisions and stronger execution. Principle 5: contingency preparation over reactive management. Walsh's most sophisticated leadership skill was what he called contingency planning, systematically preparing for every possible scenario before they occurred. While other coaches reacted to problems, Walsh had already prepared solutions. Here's how this worked. Walsh believed that preparation and practice sessions should be designed so that the performer is trained for all potential outcomes and events. He didn't just plan for what he hoped would happen, he prepared for everything that could happen. His contingency planning covered every aspect of the organization: personnel decisions, strategic scenarios, crisis management, competitive responses, even travel logistics. Walsh said, "We would talk about how it feels to fly into enemy territory. We would discuss what crosses your mind when you take the field." But the genius was in the depth of preparation. Before crucial games, Walsh would script the first 25 plays, not because he was inflexible, but because he wanted the team to start with confidence while he observed how the opponent was actually playing. Walsh's philosophy was simple: everyone in the NFL is intense. The difference is who's prepared and who isn't. The result? The 49ers became famous for their poise under pressure because they had already rehearsed most scenarios they encountered. Players said they felt like they had already been in every situation before, even when facing it for the first time. But here's what made Walsh's preparation different: it created options rather than rigidity. He said, "You have to account for the ebb and flow. Every football game is full of it, and you have to account for that." This is what Walsh called adaptive preparation: planning thoroughly enough to respond flexibly when situations changed. Now, why does this matter for your leadership? Most leaders either overplan or become rigid, or underplan and react constantly. Neither approach creates sustainable performance under pressure. The tactical takeaway: develop systematic contingency planning for your critical challenges. Prepare multiple scenarios so you can respond quickly and confidently when conditions change. This is exactly what I see in most organizations that thrive during uncertainty. Leaders who prepare extensively during calm periods so they can adapt quickly during crisis. They don't just hope for the best, they prepare for multiple possibilities. Walsh understood that superior preparation creates the mental freedom to adapt when others are paralyzed by unexpected circumstances. The key takeaway here: superior preparation creates freedom to adapt under pressure. Now, here's how all these principles work together in practice. Look at the 49ers transformation from 1979 to 1989. This is systematic innovation creating sustained excellence. You had systematic innovation. The West Coast offense didn't just win games, it changed how football is played. Walsh engineered solutions to specific competitive problems rather than hoping for creative breakthroughs. You had standards driven culture. The 17 principles of Walsh's standard of performance created organizational DNA that worked regardless of personnel changes. Players knew exactly what was expected and how to deliver it. Teaching based leadership. Walsh developed players beyond their obvious capabilities because he systematically broke down complex skills into learnable components. Joe Montana became great not just through talent, but through systematic development. You had collaborative excellence. The 49ers made brilliant adjustments because Walsh captured collective intelligence from coaches and players. Everyone contributed to solutions, so everyone executed with understanding. You had contingency preparation. Walsh's teams performed under pressure because they had rehearsed almost every scenario. Preparation during calm periods created automatic responses during crises. Notice the integration. The innovation created competitive advantage. The standards ensured consistent execution. The teaching developed capabilities. The collaboration improved decisions. And the preparation enabled adaptation under pressure. This is the difference between good leaders and legendary leaders. They don't just use individual tactics, they create systematic approaches where every principle reinforces every other principle to create sustainable competitive advantage. In your organization, this looks like documented innovation processes instead of random creativity, written standards instead of motivational speeches, systematic development instead of hoping for talent, collaborative decision making instead of individual genius, and contingency planning instead of reactive management. Walsh proved that systematic leadership creates better results than charismatic leadership because systems scale and charisma doesn't. So there you have it. Bill Walsh's leadership model, broken down into 5 systematic principles: systematic innovation, standards driven culture, teaching based leadership, collaborative excellence, and contingency preparation. The bottom line, Walsh didn't just win championships. He created a blueprint for systematic excellence that changed an entire industry. He proved that innovation isn't about creative genius, it's about the systematic thinking applied to competitive problems. Now, here's your homework for this week. Pick one of these principles and systemize it within your organization. If you're struggling with innovation, start with systematic innovation. If your culture is inconsistent, focus on standards driven culture. If you found this valuable, subscribe for more championship leadership case studies. Next week, we're breaking down Pete Carroll and how he built championship cultures through energy, positivity, and competitive excellence. And if you're a business leader who wants to create systematic innovation like Walsh did, check out the link in the description. I work with executives who want to build competitive advantages through systematic leadership rather than hoping for individual brilliance. Until next time, lead like a legend.